Guys, I'm going to try to sip this tea as loud as is physically possible every few seconds.
Please ruin everyone's auditory experience.
Butterscotch. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 45 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I do web-related things.
I'm Sam and I make art.
Today is April 12th, 2016.
And we're just totally boning this intro.
Why?
Just
It's okay.
over and over again.
We'll truncate the silences. What people don't know is that there was a 45-minute delay there in between my intro and Adam introducing himself.
I know.
But we'll cut
It's
we'll
true.
Cut that out.
I was actually timing it. For some reason, I just started a timer right when Seth finished, and I just watched it and waited until it hit
You're just
45
like, let me
minutes.
hit that 45.
I think we should just restart this.
No, we got this.
Yeah, we're doing great. Let's just
We got this.
continue.
We got this. We got a good
roll on.
We got good energy.
got
we
bad
good
oaths.
synergy. All right, and before we get started, we do have a warning, which is there's going to be profanity
Definitely.
and
A shit
mentions
load
of adult
of it.
concepts and languages,
Like quantum
So it-
physics, string theory, and the financial impacts of derivatives in the housing market. Very
Yeah,
adult
and some
things.
fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
So if you're a child, this is clearly way above your pay grade. So get out. Okay. So let's get started. We have a couple of news items to hit, and then we will get to some player questions. So for starters, and we talked about this a little bit last week, we have a job opening, which is super exciting for us because we've been a studio for 3 years and we've never had a job opening before.
We've nearly
this
had some
job-
job closings, though, technically.
So this job is called the Game Mechanic, and it is a person who essentially will take over our existing portfolio of games and keep them up to date, make sure they are functioning, add new content, do balance patches, and bring them to new platforms. So if that's something you are interested in, head on over to jobs.bscotch.net. We will have more information over there, as well as you can put your name into the hat for a newsletter so that you will be notified as soon as the position actually becomes available for you to apply to. Anything else on that, guys?
No.
One other thing is that when we first put it up, we said, you've got to live in St. Louis or be willing to move to St. Louis to do it. But we had a very eloquently written, I guess, request, complaint, I don't know, feedback from some eloquent rando who noted.
That was his name, actually. Eloquent Rando.
That was his username.
It's a good rap name, too.
Yeah, perfect. And he said, hey, I think I'd be perfect for this job, except that I absolutely cannot move. Is it really required that we have somebody live here? And we thought about it, and we're like, actually, it's still preferred, but probably it'd be fine for this particular kind of job because it doesn't require a huge amount of brainstorming and always like being in the middle of the social action. While we do prefer that, it's just not required for this. So we decided to relax that requirement.
There's also an interesting book by the guys who run 37 Signals, which is a really powerful software company that makes stuff like Basecamp and a few other things. It's called Remote. And the idea is the guys had a similar sort of idea where they're looking to hire, the best software engineers they could find. And the problem was, of course, that most of the people who exist in the world are not where you are, which by definition means that
almost all of them, actually.
Yeah, almost all.
If you do the math.
So then, as an extension of that, most of the best people are also not where you are, even if you're in like one of the best places to be. So they figured out how to do remote work. And so they have one sort of central office in Chicago, and then a lot of people, it's the same sort of thing. Like a lot of people live there and a lot of people work there, but then they also are totally open to completely remote working. So I'm going to read through that, get some ideas for how to handle such a thing. We've been doing it with Adam for the past year and a half, but at the same time, I think it's just because it's been less enjoyable for us than we would like as far as handling.
It's nice to have actual humans around you.
Yeah.
If it was just the case that I was given a task list and told, go do these things, and those tasks were very well defined, didn't require me to mentally collaborate with other people and so on, then like remote working, it would be socially kind of sucky, but it would be fine from a doing work perspective, I guess.
Yeah, which isn't quite what this job won't be us dictating tasks. It'll be very self-directed, but
Well, I mean, it'll be
I think we can
both.
make it work. But yeah,
It'd be exciting.
I think overall remote working it's just definitely not as enjoyable or socially fulfilling as actually being there. But
And not only that, it throws a lot of wrenches in things because, I mean, we'll also like to be involved with community stuff and chatting with up and coming game devs and that sort of thing. And by necessity, I miss basically all of those because that's primarily done in St. Louis. And there are other pieces too. I mean, like we were lamenting the fact that earlier in the week, Sam and Seth were hanging out at one of their houses before we kind of started the workday, and then all of a sudden had a fun idea and started talking about it. And realized that if I was able for me to participate in those things, either they have to decide to actively squash that discussion until later, or fill me in on the details after it happens, which are both really sucky alternatives. So there is a true cost. It's not just
well, the cost is really in sort of creativity and collaboration and building a team feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, that those are all very important to what we're trying to do. So, which I'll say again, we're removing that requirement, but that's only going to be for people who are just so good that those are things we're willing to put up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then otherwise we just got a new run of t-shirts started.
You can go to bit.lys or bit.ly. I always say bit.ly. bit.ly/bscotch shirts.
Damn it.
Bscotch shirts in order to get both the Butterscotch Shenanigans one you guys see us wearing all the time.
Now, Sam,
we pretty much live in. What?
As an avid podcast listener myself, I seem to recall that the URL is supposed to be bit.ly/bscotch jorts.
Yeah, it's not anymore. It's Bscotch shirts.
Yeah, something changed, and we had to evolve and grow as people, and thereby change our Bitly link.
This is part of us being an agile corporation.
Yep, we just demonstrated agile business principles.
Join us.
We pivoted even.
So, yeah, we pivoted to bit.ly/bscotch shirts, but we have the normal Butterscotch ones, which we wear all the time, and then we also got this ridiculously, hardcore, kind of metal Crashlands shirt.
It was best described by some Twitter user as nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
That might have been Mia, our number one Australian fan.
May have been.
And it's pretty nutty. And so we've been trying to build up enough. We're going to start building up enough new designs and stuff in the shop that we could actually have one theoretically open all the time, as opposed to just doing these runs. But that's probably a project probably happen later in the year. So until then, you only have until May 1st to grab one. So definitely go get them. They're super soft and luxurious, and they're screen printed, so they'll last for pretty much forever until the sun goes out.
Basically forever.
But because they're screen printed, just bear in mind that the ordering and shipping process doesn't work the same as maybe other online ordering you're used to. So we're collecting orders for 3 weeks. Then at the end of that 3 weeks, they all get printed at once, and then they all get shipped. So you won't get it. It won't be like you order it and then within a week you get it. It's a week after the orders close.
Yeah, we're not Amazon. We're Butterscotch.
Come on. We're a small operation working with another small operation.
True.
Speaking of Bitly links, we got another one.
We got a lot of them.
Which is the Quality of Life patch is hitting. I guess today technically is Wednesday in podcast time, so it's arriving
late tonight.
So we'll be out tonight, actually, even though technically launch day is Thursday. We're really excited about it. It's got all sorts of cool stuff, and you can go read up on the patch notes at bit.ly/qual, QOL patch. But the interesting thing is that we actually rebuilt the entire world map. We had so many complaints about the fact that you couldn't, pan it or use it like you do most of your map sort of tools on a mobile device. So,
and by pan you mean filter gold and other high quality materials out of it.
Yeah, I mean you couldn't shake your phone and expect that gold would fly out. And that was
but we've added
upsetting
that
to
as a
people.
feature now.
Yeah,
it's a new thing.
So be wary if you're shaking it in public because
you're just gold's gonna be popping out of your phone.
Flying.
Yeah, you're gonna get mugged so fast.
And Seth went back and basically ripped out the whole map and then just rebuilt it using his new knowledges that he acquired over the course of actually developing the game, because the map is one of the oldest parts.
Would you describe this as newledge?
I think, yes, it is new.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of making the game, I actually acquired 32 knowledges, and so I used about 3 of those up when I rebuilt the world map.
It's kind of like
I'm
in
down
an
to, I'm
RPG.
down to 29, but it's still a pretty good amount,
so knowledges are consumable.
It's a consumable currency. Yeah.
Is that something we could sell in an IAP?
Oh yeah, I mean that's how I got mine. So
like
where
the-
did you buy your Newledge from?
I just got it off Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also we added a bunch of new items to the game, including a like chloroform rag thing that you can slap on your pet's.
What's it actually
It's
called?
called a
in the game?
memory towelette.
A memory towelette.
So you wipe the
And-
memory and rename them with it, which is
You
great.
can, yeah, it lets you rename your pets. We got some crazy items like pot slappers. That's like a thing that you slap it, and then it slaps all of the potted plants around it to harvest them. So you don't have to individually slap all of them. We got these weird things you can put on the ground that make you slide. Colorblind modes. New UI stuff like movable hot bars, whole bunch of bug fixes. It's just a good
Yeah.
fat
And if you don't
patch.
like,
Are the slidey things in the trailer?
No.
I didn't
No,
see that.
I did not put them in there.
but they are in a GIF on the blog post.
Yeah, so-
or GIF if you're crazy.
if you don't like, speaking of, so Adam just mentioned the trailer. If you don't like reading, we actually put together another trailer, the Quality of Life patch trailer.
Although to be fair, you should not be playing Crashlands if you don't like reading.
That's true.
Yeah.
There are a lot of words in it. But this sort of condenses the entirety of, I don't know how many pages of patch notes into a minute. So, and it's enjoyable to watch. So definitely check that out, and that'll give you the
And
skinny-
by that you mean we literally put all of the patch notes in at the end in an extremely
exactly what
rapidly
I mean.
scrolling thing that goes by over the course of 1 second. So yeah, we have that. And like Sam said, that's at bit.ly/QOL patch if you want to watch that trailer. And this is also the first time we've ever made a trailer for a patch.
Yeah.
So
Well, this is actually-
if you guys liked this, let us know.
Yeah, some of you might have seen in our SoundCloud list, we have the unpublished trailer sound bites, which was from the launch trailer that we wanted to make but didn't actually have time to because of all the craziness leading up to launch. So Crashlands actually only has one trailer, which is from the Greenlight campaign from back 7 months before launch, and so this is also the second trailer for Crashlands actually. So pretty excited about it. It's goofy. It's the same sort of thing. But definitely check it out. Get some entertainment. Get some screaming in. There's plenty of Crashlands yells, so it'll be a good time.
And speaking of video production, there is a Kickstarter, which we mentioned this last week, but it's still ongoing.
Still kicking.
And this Kickstarter is for the documentary that's being made by Forever an Astronaut. And it's about the production of Crashlands and about sort of the backstory behind the game and how we did it, and about Sam beating the shit out of cancer repeatedly while we built that game. And it's going to be great. It's a feature-length documentary. And so if you want to pre-order it or even throw even more money at it, just head over to bit.ly/Crashlandsmovie. And you can throw some cash down to help this project see the light of day.
Yeah, they're about halfway through and they still have a long ways to go. So if you chip in, you're going to help them substantially.
Yeah, and
right.
we'll also be sending that out with a lot of the stuff that you guys hear on the podcast today. In particular, is going to be also rolled into the newsletter, which is coming out on Thursday. So keep your eyes
So you
peeled
get
for
all
that.
the links you could ever want.
All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick link refresher. We got bit.ly/Bscotch shirts.
Buy your
shirt
fancy
needs.
tees.
Put that on your chest. We got bit.ly/QOL patch.
Put that
for
on your
eyeballs.
device.
Yep. And we got bit.ly/Crashlandsmovie, which you could put into your soul.
Mm-hmm. It's a good time. Speaking of soulful things, so I've always wanted to write a book. I'm just going to segue this super hard.
That was a.
You're just as good as Seth is at segues. I'm very impressed.
I'm waiting for you to try this, Adam.
Yeah, Adam.
Yeah. So
Armchair segueing back there.
always wanted to try to write a book, or I guess not to try to write a book, to write a book.
You did write a book. It's called Metaphorgasm.
Well, I've written,
it's available on Amazon.
Why do you gotta just shut up about that? God damn it! So I did write a poetry book, which we will not speak of ever again after this.
It's called Metaphorgasm. Available on Amazon.
Also, somebody bought it after the last time we talked. So I haven't gotten royalties from this thing for since ever. And then it was like, you earned $6, and I was like, hey, it's a sandwich. Somebody bought me a sandwich.
Someone just gave you a sandwich.
And in return, I will hurt their soul with terrible poetry. But I've always wanted to write a book, and we actually, Adam and I participated in NaNoWriMo, which for those who aren't familiar is National Novel Writing Month, hence the weird acronym.
It could also be NaNoWriMo, or no?
I think Remo sounds better.
NaNoWriMo.
But so that's every November, and the goal there is to write a 50,000 word story over the course of a month. And the whole point
You could probably go to nanorama.com, I think.
I think NaNoWriMo is the easiest way to think about it. You're going to end up in the dark
I
corner.
prefer just look up National Novel Writing Month.
There, that's good.
I guess.
So it's actually
sure.
really fun to do, and Adam and I have done it twice. Did you finish the second time, man?
I did it once, and actually I spent a bunch of time afterwards editing that thing until I decided it was too much of a fucking mess to do.
As books written in 30 days usually are, you know.
Well, it's that, and there was the beauty of NaNoWriMo is that you go into it and you say, okay, I'm going to write a fucking book, come hell or high water. I don't care if it's garbage.
It's like a game jam.
It's a game jam.
It's about the practice.
30-day jam.
It's a very Zen sort of thing where you're like, it doesn't matter. You just got to just do the thing.
It was great. I mean, I would get up every morning. I would sit down and write for half an hour to an hour. Every night, I would write for half an hour to an hour. On the weekends, I would sit down for like a 3-hour writing marathon on both Saturday and Sunday, and just did that for the whole month.
It was also a lot of fun because we actually had like a competitive spreadsheet where everybody would clue in their with their word count for the day, and then it had a tracker to show you if you were ahead or on target with how many words per day you need to be putting in to hit the 50,000 mark, which is actually a really fun and motivating thing. I know I fell behind by I think like 6 days once, and then just wrote.
Yeah, then you had to write like a
You just
marathon.
slammed
I
it.
wrote like 8,000 words in 2 days. It was gross. Yeah, so we have written some books, but they've never been anything worthwhile, both poetry and the NaNoWriMo stuff. So someone mentioned that I'd mentioned in like 20 podcasts ago this idea of writing an Inkscape book. So Inkscape, for those who aren't familiar, is the open source vector program that I use to do the art for all of our games. And so I started looking around a little bit when someone reminded me that I had mentioned that I wanted to do this at some point, and I couldn't actually find an Inkscape book that was practical in the sense that it actually focused on getting you from opening the program to like really producing some good stuff and then getting it plugged into anything of use like a website or how to export stuff specifically, that sort of thing. So I was actually thinking about maybe doing that as my sort of side project for the next little bit here, is putting together an Inkscape book. And the joke with the previous one is it was called Let's Build a Fucking Snowman. And that was the idea. It's like, you just build the snowman out of...
Just do it.
Just do it. Probably won't actually be... That's the working title. So probably won't actually be called that. But if any of you guys are
the
interested
actual
in that,
title will just be called Build a Fucking Snowman because it's just them doing it really.
yeah. But
Was it that whole thing you just said that was the title? It was still a little long for my taste.
the 80 words. It'd just be a
Too many
screen.
commas.
But so the rough idea
it was the whole thing.
is that it'll start with literally opening the program, which tools to completely ignore, which is most of them, and then kind of how to build an asset, how to export it, how to get it, how to think about engineering your assets such that they can actually be used in a game, and then there would be little YouTube time lapses that you could go reference as well. For
So
each
I have
department.
a suggestion.
What's that?
So I've tried to crack open a whole bunch of programming books way back in the day before I knew how to program.
And were they terrible? Because usually they are.
They were terrible, I think, for a couple of reasons. One was that I would often be just like instructed to do things without any understanding about where it was going.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, now you know.
I
I
think
mean, we're here to build a fucking snowman, Seth.
yeah. But I think one important thing to do is to kick it off by showing something like the finished product and explaining like what it's gonna be. But then the other thing, so you had mentioned the idea of talking about what not to use or what to ignore. It may be better to just never mention those things.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Then you save reading time.
I
right?
wanted
Yeah.
to take. Well, it would be a brief. I mean, the whole thing would be very concise because I don't have time for blowing hot air around. But I think it'd be really funny just to show a picture of what the UI actually looks like to me, which is essentially most
Just
of it's
erase
gone.
the-
Yeah. There's like the pencil tool, and that's about it. And then we're just, it's off to the races. So I think it'd be a lot of fun if people are interested in it. Like that'd be good for me to know. We're thinking about like putting these together and figuring out a way to like actually make a real book at the end of the day. Whether it's purely digital or ends up coming in actual print form is another question entirely. But if you're interested in it, send us a tweet or an email or something on the forums. because I know some people want to see it, but I'm kind of
Well,
curious.
it's going to be
what they want to
It's
see.
going to be targeted toward people who can't draw. Also,
Correct, which is the fun part because it's like
you don't
not know how to do anything.
No problem.
Just
Just
build
do
a
this
fucking
stuff
snowman.
instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's an idea. It's an
Well,
idea.
give us
It's
some.
in the
Yeah,
works.
give Sam some feedback on whether that's something that you would like to see. This is me speaking to our listeners, not to you.
Yeah.
Sam. That would be super weird. Okay, well let's hit some questions, and these questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. They are asked by Bscotch ID users as well as the occasional rando. So let's just jump right into it.
All right. So the first question is from Mitron, who I believe is a newcomer to the podcast. So welcome. And she asks, what inspired you to start Coffee with Butterscotch? Are there any other game dev comedy podcasts you guys listen to and could recommend? I think the first, like the start of Coffee with Butterscotch, there's still a video floating around, which if you haven't seen,
It's on our
definitely
YouTube
seeing it.
channel, on the Butterscotch YouTube channel.
Yeah. It's an old one. And that was around the time we did Talfight, I think.
It was
And
after
maybe
Quadrupus.
Quadrupus, yeah. And the goal was to make this sort of thing that we could weekly produce that sort of caught people up. And really the whole point of it was actually to humanize ourselves, because I think people generally over the internet tend to think that every service they get or every business they interact with is this sort of huge faceless entity. And when they humanize it a bit, it seems to help as far as both building a fan base, but then also just people treating us a little bit better. So we wanted to start up this series that did that. And the original goal was actually to have it be a video series, which is what you saw or what you'll see in that first video. But the reality is that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
For us especially. And so, I mean, even doing the podcast it's about an hour and a half to get all the recording stuff done. And then it used to be, before we turfed the editing of it over to Fat Bard, bless his heart, it would take about 3 hours for someone to go through and edit the whole thing down. So it's actually a big time commitment for us that does, in a sense, take away from games production or whatever else. And with the video on top of that, we realized we couldn't really do it. So we just kind of dropped it for a long time until Adam came back on. And then he was like, we need a better way to reach out to our people and grow this thing. And it started with, I don't even know how many listens we got in the first one, like 50.
Yeah, I mean, we were
it always
chilling
starts
at
like 50.
under 100 listens forever.
Yeah, and you just slowly, keep on working on it, and then slowly, it's been getting more people, and of course, the more people who end up playing our games, the more successful games we have, hopefully, the more listenership we'll get. And the idea is that it's not just for people who play our games, though it is more so targeted toward them. So anybody who's interested in game dev and just games in general can pop in and have a good time. But it's sort of always, we're still evolving the thing, trying to figure out what the heck to do with it. So it's been a weird, bit of a windy.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing.
I don't know,
Well, and it's become something though where it's a thing that we get to do where we can just kind of unwind a bit at the top of the week, because it's easy to get really bogged down in the shit of game development.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah,
There's a lot of it, and I mean, and we're about to launch this Crashlands patch, I guess tomorrow for day one listeners. That's going to bring with it a whole bunch of new reviews and a bunch of positivity, but also a whole bunch of negativity, because that's just part of the package. And anytime we do that kind of stuff, it's always nice to have a thing where we can go, just kind of hang out and just get jokey and philosophical about some stuff and direct that towards the people who we know actually care about what we're doing.
I guess it's almost like a talk therapy for us.
Yeah.
on a weekly basis.
It's a good sanity refresher.
Yeah. Do you guys listen to any other game dev or comedy podcasts, I guess? Or game dev comedy podcasts?
The main podcast I listen to, besides sort of informational ones like from NPR and stuff, really the main one I listen to is Mabim Bam, my brother, and me.
Which is also three brothers.
It's also three brothers. They're a little bit older than us on average, but they're editors at Polygon, and they have basically a big podcast network, and they've been at this for 5+ years.
Yeah,
I think.
but it's not a gaming podcast. It's just an advice. Well, it's
No.
more of a comedy. It's a comedy podcast disguised as an advice podcast.
So we listened to that a fair bit and turned to it for kind of inspiration for how to do this kind of thing well, which we're still figuring out, obviously, but that's what our goal is. So I would say that was great, but they also, probably their better one is, what is their adventure?
The Adventure
Zone. Yeah, where they play Dungeons and Dragons
With their dad.
with their dad. And it's very It's very hilarious. But in terms of just straight up game dev, I've actually tried a whole bunch of game dev podcasts. Almost universally, they talk about the hottest new game and sort of give a play-by-play of their experiences within it, which we've also done from time to time on our podcast. But what I found is that it feels the same to me. For most of those podcasts, feel the same to me as reading like a PC Gamer review,
Yeah.
where it's kind of it's a handful of people spouting opinions as facts in a very judgmental way.
Which that's what we want to do.
It just rubs me the wrong way. Without a doubt. I mean, there are some that don't do that. But I've had trouble finding something that felt like it was informative and interesting and fun to listen to without also being just overly negative.
So somebody should recommend some good game dev podcasts to us. How about that?
Yeah, we'd love to hear about them.
Yeah.
It is interesting how when you take the critical eye towards things, there's usually a skew towards negativity, right? And I think it's interesting that it ends up being sort of almost against the general comedy feel. And we noticed this with there's one review that got published about Crashlands, semi recently. It was like very late in the game. I don't remember. I think it was on Game Grin or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And the reviewer was so mean. Like the guy was so mean, just like ridiculously mean.
Yeah, he was.
That it was clear that he wasn't there to actually critique the game. He was there essentially to make fun of us, of the game, and to like crack jokes at its expense. And they didn't even feel funny. Like it literally just felt like a guy being.
It was
mean
the
internet.
the dude showing up and kicking over the sandcastle you just built on the beach. That was.
Yeah.
And then looking around and being like, I'm just joking, guys. Look
Prank,
how funny
bro.
this is.
Just a prank.
Yeah. So I think there tends to be a skew into that a little bit with critique, and I like the people who manage to, after years of doing critical work on projects, who manage to actually approach it with a sort of lightness. I've always found that really interesting because I feel like it's so. I mean, we've even had it just as being game designers critiquing our own projects constantly, and then looking and turning over to other games, and it's so easy to do that, to just like be mean and make fun of. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess, when we did our gaming spree. All of us had to kind of remind each other. I think Adam more so in a few cases had to remind us to actually be open to playing the damn game, like
without trying to find flaws immediately and reason.
Yeah, we were trying to play Division, and the fucking game hadn't even started yet, and Sam and Seth were just complaining endlessly about the game and what it was about to be.
Well, to be fair though, it hadn't started for like 30 minutes because it was crashing.
My problem was I was caught. I had to rewatch the opening cutscene, which is maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I had to rewatch it 6 times because there's no way to skip it, and the game would crash. Like it would show me the cutscene, and then in between the cutscene and the game starting, it would crash, and then I had to reopen it, and then. Yeah,
I get it,
but we were being dicks. Let's just be real.
We were being dicks about it. But it's one of those things, it's so easy to fall into that trap where something, trap. And this is what we get. Well, this is what we get from our players too, right? The players who are angry at us about something. It's not that they're just universally angry about Crashlands, except for this one guy, right? But for the most part, it's something happens to them in the game that is a bad experience, or just not the experience they want. And because they can't do anything but turn that frustration into rage, then just a single bad event basically turns them against the product and turns them against us. And it's one of those interesting things, because no matter how hard you fight it, like it's easy to happen to anybody. I mean, this is exactly what happened to Sam and Seth when we were trying to play the Division.
Well, I think what made me...
Because they both had a bad start coming into it, when they actually started playing the game, that whole bad start bled really hard into the intro experience. So they were just like mocking it relentlessly, even though there was really nothing wrong with it once they got past the rough part.
Yeah, and I think for me too, and I was personally particularly salty about it because this is the first time in probably like 4 or 5 years that I have dropped the full price for a AAA game from a huge studio. And so I did that expecting, a much higher level of like polish and testing and bug freeness. And I just didn't.
Not correlated, turns out.
So so that kind of contaminated my view of the rest of the experience. And then I approached it angrily from that point forward.
Well, now you get it, right? When somebody drops $5 on Crashlands,
it's a lot for them for a mobile game.
And then maybe their game crashes right when they go to start fighting a boss, or maybe they accidentally recycle something because they were confused by the UI, or they're just like some little thing that just kind of like ruins their moment, not their day.
Yeah, but it does then
Ruins
just
their
kind of
moment a
spill
little
over
bit.
into the rest.
Well, I think it's so. Right before we started the podcast, Adam, you were talking about. I think it was you, Adam, who was talking about some guy who made their game free on Steam for a weekend.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, there was a
you?
Gama Sutra article.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
There's a Gama Sutra article where somebody, they had a space game. I think it's called Fractured Space or something like that. They made their game free for a weekend on Steam. And the article was interesting. It didn't cover a lot of general stuff. It was just them sort of digging into player statistics and trying to figure. They just wanted a huge influx of players so they could analyze the flow of things in their game and see where their tutorial was pushing people out and stuff like that.
I think they were talking about that they were going to eventually make it free to play or something.
So they kind of were doing some experiments. So they made it free for a weekend, and they did get, I think, well over 100,000 something new players that weekend. But what one person in the comments left an interesting question, and I never saw whether this got answered or not, but they pointed out that they had worked with a studio who had done the same thing. They made their game free for a weekend, and they were just flooded with negative reviews from all their free players, and it dropped their Steam score dramatically. So,
which is very interesting because people who get things for free behave very differently when it comes to the critique versus people who pay for things.
Yep.
And I think this is an interesting point, and I think it also is a weird and interesting point when it comes to games reviewers. Just to pull that whole thing back together, because they get all their games for free as well.
That is
right?
true.
So if you review games, you do not pay for games. If you're with one of the big sites, you just get a Steam code. You go download it, play it, and then make some comments on it. And the interesting thing is what you see, and we've noticed this with our free-to-play titles, and we talked about this a bit with our overall approach to going actually more toward paid, is that free-to-play players in general are much more negative with regards to how they perceive the experience. You can have the same game, and if you're charging $2 for it versus making it free, I would wager, as that Steam guy probably saw, that what you're going to see is a much better review score on the $2 version than on the free version. And it's not just because of the volume of people who are getting through and therefore, more bugs, whatever else, but I think it's mainly because if you just look over how people actually react to this thing, it appears that when something is free, people are essentially more negative.
I think they value it lower. Just
right. Yeah. Right, but I think the other side of that, though, is the interesting psych part, which Seth, you had teased out earlier, which is that there's this concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance, and it basically follows that rather than the traditional view of a human being that your thought is what inspires your action, the reality is, for the most part, that your action is actually what inspires your thought. So what I mean by that
your brain is constantly
if it's the
trying
case-
to reconcile what you're doing and the decisions that you've made.
Exactly. So in the case of something like cognitive dissonance, if you were to say go spend $60 on a AAA title, it is the case that you as a person do not like bad things, right? You wouldn't spend $60 on a piece of garbage. It's just not
because you have good judgment and stuff.
And so if it's the case that you buy a game that costs you a good amount of cash in this case. In the case of Crashlands, like $5 on mobile is essentially equivalent to, $60 on Steam as far as people are concerned. So what ends up happening there is that there is some cognitive dissonance that the player ends up having to resolve because they spent a bunch of money on something. And if it's the case that thing is bad, then in some interesting ways, and there's been plenty of experiments on this, you guys should definitely look it up because it's super weird and neat. If that is the case, that they bought something they paid money for, then the expectation is actually that it's not even the expectation, but the outcome is simply that it's good. The outcome is more likely to be that it's good.
Even if it's perceived as bad, it's perceived as less bad.
Exactly.
Than it otherwise would have been.
Right. And so I think with free to play and with paid games,
there's an important caveat here, though, that I want to
What's that?
I want to hit, which is if when you buy the game, you feel in some way that you have to, or that at the time of buying it, you feel like it's more expensive than it should be. So that you've sort of passed this judgment that you're already sort of making a bad investment.
Sure.
Then I think it probably pushes it way the other direction. Because this is what happened with you guys when you both paid $60 to buy the Division.
It's
right?
exactly right.
Is you were pissed that you were paying that much because, like Seth said, he hasn't done that.
Well,
for
not only
years.
that, but it's not a game that I was interested in, and I was
Yeah, so you also
I
felt
felt
like
like
you
I had
to
to do that because everybody was talking about it, everybody was playing it, and I wanted to explore the game and kind of see what it was all about, you know. So it wasn't something that I was necessarily looking forward to doing.
So then I think in that scenario, then having to pay for a game must actually end up giving more negativity than if
Yeah,
it was
but it's
for
generally
free.
not going to be the case for most players that they feel like they had to buy the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it does mean though that if your game feels overpriced for what it is, and this you see happen over and over again and we talked about this in the past too, where when people think of the value of a game as how much time you spend in it, then if there's a mismatch between how a player views the price of the game versus how much quote unquote content it has, which they just mean time spent in it, I guess, then you see a lot of negativity around that. So if you look at like the negative reviews of say Monument Valley
Or Firewatch.
or Firewatch
or The Witness, right?
Although Witness has plenty of time, but people feel like it's the same thing over and over again, right?
Sure.
But definitely with Firewatch and like Monument Valley, which are both, reasonably priced games for the interestingness and production value and all of that. But they're short games in terms of just how long it takes to get from start to finish. And so then there's a strong backlash against that because people buy the game thinking this dollar tag means that I'm going to get a certain amount of stuff out of this, and then when they don't, now they're pissed about it. Right. So there are these other cases
It can backfire.
where it can backfire, where an expectations mismatch between how a game is priced and what the game has in it, and what the player values can also lead to more negative comments. So these are all basically saying you got to understand what it is your players think is important, not what you think is important, but what your players think is important, and try to price or use a financial model that your players will
Appreciate.
feel like that they'll feel like is fair without going so far to the fair to player side that it's really unfair to the developer. And so if you take like the price model of Crashlands, we wanted to charge more than $5 for it on mobile, but we knew that players would see that as unfair.
Even though it's
So we didn't.
Even though it's at $15 on Steam, it's totally reasonable, right?
Yeah, and we would have loved to have charged $20 on Steam, but we knew we're an unknown developer. We're making a 2D game, and so we wanted to price it a little bit lower so that players went in without thinking that their expectations had been in some way violated, or without thinking I paid a whole bunch for this game, more than I really should have. This better be worth it, because then they come in with the wrong.
Yeah, just as a kind of a final thought on that before we hit the next question, I think it is definitely the case that you can't use your own thoughts about the value of the game as a developer to price it, because you put 2 years of your life into this thing or whatever, and for you personally, maybe you gave up tens of thousands of dollars of salary that you could have gotten working somewhere else or something to make this game. So you can't charge tens of thousands of dollars for the game. Like that's insane. So
Not happening.
yeah.
Well, I think this leads to an interesting other question from Map5597, who asks, or points out, he said, you're providing a pretty good salary for the new person, and are you guys going to continue then making paid games, or just use that butter up system? And how much time on average do you expect each game from here on out to take?
So that's funny that he says that we're providing a good salary because we've gotten.
Oh yeah, you want to
Some
talk
people
about
would
that?
I mean,
real
we
quick?
can. Yeah, so we decided
weird.
we
It is
decided to
weird.
go ahead and put the salary on the job description. A lot of companies don't do that, and I think it's kind of weird. But I mean, I understand because there's all kinds of negotiations that happen and stuff, and a lot of times, a company will just try to lowball employees to try to get as much out of them as possible. But we thought we would just put the number down and just stick to it. And if it doesn't sound reasonable to somebody, then they just don't apply, right? And that's fine. But we have gotten a number of comments from people who are upset at how low the salary is, which is interesting because it's actually, I think it's well above the median for.
Well, it's about the average for a games programmer.
For a games programmer, yeah. And also our intention is.
Yeah, but for a software engineer, it's definitely low.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's an issue with basically in the games. Well, and also I would point out that it's basically what we can afford. So, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's why we
can't
actually
really-
selected it. Because
can't
that's all
really
we
go
can
higher.
do.
I just want to point out, my favorite part of this is that it's like we've been struggling for 3 years, right? Getting paid either nothing or very close to it. And then finally we're able to pay ourselves, and we're paying this person the equivalent of what we pay ourselves as far as salary is concerned, right? So it was just, I think it cracked me up on an annoyed level that I don't know if I can communicate. to have someone be like, "Oh, that's not.
I
nearly
need more.
enough."
I'm gonna bring a lot more to the table.
Yeah, and I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, what?
Well, but it is
and
true
not even-
that we have a skewed perspective about this because of the fact that we've basically foregone 3 years of decent income or some income at all in some cases.
Sure, but I mean, there's also the question of, like, it's, to me, it's not even about like our goal. I think the other thing is we think about the salary a little bit differently when it comes to value add, and then also when it comes to the fact that if you make $60K, and part of the reason we're talking about living in St. Louis is that if you make $60K in St. Louis, that just gets you, to
You're
the moon
fine.
as far as life is concerned. So it wouldn't work if you're in, San Francisco or something. But it was just interesting getting that reaction.
So just to kind of reveal some of our, because we always say, oh yeah, like we didn't really make very much, blah blah blah. Sam was at $18K a year for the first 2 years of our studio existing, and he did not have spousal support at the time that was the case, etc. Because his fiance was going to college. So,
we weren't that serious yet.
But
could take it up a notch.
At that time, he still had spending money left over at the end of each month, or was breaking even, right? So, St. Louis is just a cheap place to live, and especially if you're intelligent about it. So, yeah, it's
right. And then you didn't make any money for the first.
I made zero for the first 18 months, and then I was getting $500 a month. So whatever that comes out to, $6,000 a year.
Yeah.
About a bag of toothpaste.
It's not a lot.
Right. So I think it was. I don't know how to feel about it. I guess maybe I don't actually know how to feel about it because, like you said, Seth,
we have a
we've
skewed
been in the trenches for so long. Right. But I think it felt weird because it was like, and we even got the comment from some people in the local community about like, oh, that seems like a low salary. And it's like, you guys have seen us struggling for 3 years. I don't like, it was just,
to us, it's just
so
an
weird that we're
astronomical
like,
amount.
yeah, like that we could actually offer that genuinely to, one of our fellow community members who might join the team or just, some perhaps a remote person or whatever, is so cool to us. And like, we're so excited
we come out, we're like, look, guys, we're able to
like,
do this. And people are like, just now,
This cracks me up.
It hasn't been all or even
No,
mostly.
we've gotten that comment.
No, but I mean, you know how humans are. I mean, negative stuff sticks out, right?
Yeah, but it's been like I want to say I've seen 3 comments that were negative.
Yeah.
But I've seen like 10 of people who were super pumped and felt like that was fair. But I want to actually, we're focusing on the numbers here, and I don't think that's actually very important. I think the interesting, or like to us, we value ourselves and our future employees as people, and our goal is not to pay them as little as possible. We're not going to negotiate salaries and try to lowball it as hard as we can, right? We're going to try to provide what we think is a fair salary that we can afford as a company, which is the biggest problem right now, and that we know is enough to support a human being, and like let them be alive and pay their bills and do all that
multiple
kind of
humans.
Have them not be worried about their finances. Now, a lot of that, of course, is on the person, because if they spend their money stupidly, then they're going to always be worrying about their finances.
That's true.
But if you pay somebody too little, because there's a limit where, if you're paying somebody $30K a year or something like that, almost no matter where you live, people can't really save on certain salaries.
Yeah, you can't really be comfortable at that point.
Yeah, you can't be comfortable, you can't save, you can't have an emergency fund. There's all this kind of stuff that can't happen at certain levels of income. And to me, it's been amazing to see businesses that start there.
Yeah.
Or that try to negotiate down to those kinds of levels instead of saying, what's kind of the minimum level that a person can be comfortable as a human being on, and let's try to get there or above it.
Well, and that's what
we want to do. And so we found the number that we were like, okay, what the company can afford that is also an acceptable minimum for a human being to live off of is what we are providing. And as the company becomes more established and as our employees are with us for longer periods of time, like, yeah, we're going to pay them as much as we think the company can afford to pay them. And it's not about paying them as little as possible. So to me, that's been the interesting thing is I think probably a lot of this is that people are assuming when they see the salary that we're putting up there, that because it's low compared to like a software engineer, then they're gonna look at that and be like, oh, you guys are trying to pay your employees as little as possible, because that's the assumption. Just like when we have IAPs and a free to play game,
it's fair.
They're like, you're an evil company, you're trying to screw us.
Yeah,
and they don't know us. They don't know that
Well, yeah.
that's the best we can do, and that we actually will continue to do better and pay people more.
Well,
as
also,
they
I mean,
stay
like
with us.
the reality is this, which is that there are three of us. We are going to get, an extra person, and we're going to be working, ideally, in the ideal scenario, you're working in the same space, like, and we'll be working out of one of our houses. Like, we're inviting someone into our
family.
homes. And essentially our family, which is why we phrase it as such, like, come join the Butterscotch family. Like, it's not I guess we don't view it perhaps as corporately as people generally do view, job stuff, I guess. And I think maybe that's where the rub comes from. And I think I've always had a little bit of a knee-jerk rage reaction to feeling like I've been misread, when you're like, oh, I'm doing this. And then someone's like, no, you're doing this.
yeah.
And I'm like, shut the fuck up. No, I'm not, So
They're like, prove that you're not. I don't believe you. Or that shit. Like when Crash Lewins was getting, it still is getting just, straight like 4.7 star reviews or whatever on the platforms. And we've had people go in and accuse us of sock puppeting and manufacturing
fake reviews. Yeah.
Or of us sock puppeting Reddit users and to go on and post things about Crash Lewins and stuff, which, like, that's so aggravating. I don't know why, right? Because it doesn't matter. Nobody actually believes these crackpots.
Right? I mean,
Well, that's the problem.
do.
Is that some people actually do. Not very many.
Yeah, but it's
not gonna
tiny.
matter.
It's tiny numbers.
Well, it's like Sam was saying.
Actually
It's
matter.
when something negative happens, then that's the thing that sticks out. You could get 1,000 good reviews, and if you have one person who just hates the thing you made, it just sticks out in your mind. I mean, that's why we talked about that geek. What is it called? Geek whatever review where that person just totally hated Crash
Game
Lewins.
Grin. Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think the interesting thing about it, though, is that I think what people maybe don't see when it comes to that sort of like what happens when someone posts some bullshit comment like that on, say, the Android subreddit or the iOS gaming subreddit or whatever. The problem is that what it does to us. So there's the question of two perceptions here. One is of the community's perception overall of a developer, and the other is of a developer's perception of a community. And you actually need both to be in positive standing in order for there to be any actual relationship there whatsoever. And the interesting thing to me is that when that sort of thing pops up, even if it is one person, if it's one person in the Android subreddit or something, that actually devalues to us our time spent in that community.
Yeah,
right?
even when we know it's a super minority opinion.
Well, I
Right.
wouldn't say
And
it
so it's-
devalues. Like, it doesn't devalue the way we view the community. It just makes it so that we view spending time with that community as a possible stressor.
Yeah,
Like,
as a
in,
risk.
if we jump into that community, suddenly we're going to have this angry person, maybe one or two angry people who lashes out at us for no reason, and then that makes us not want to go there as much.
Right. And so it's very interesting because we've talked about how we don't actually use the Steam forums at all precisely because of this reason, which is that since there's no good, moderation tools or anything like that, it's just not possible to actually have a culture created where that sort of behavior is minimized, And
It's because it's the Steam community culture, and the Steam community culture, like the Reddit culture and other broader cultures for these sort of general sites, has never ever been modulated or has never been socially modulated in a valuable way. And as a consequence, you can't just like you can't tame a corner of it. Yeah, it's just there. And because it's never been tamed, then no matter what little corner you try to, focus on, you can't change it. You can't change the culture in that area because the broader culture is too toxic. And people just come in with the expectation that, hey, this is a developer on the Steam forums. My job is to harass them.
Well, it's more like I am thinking about paying, $10 or $15 for this game. Therefore, this developer has to kind of bow to my whims to get my money. It's like when people drop a 1 star and they're like, fix this one little bug that's bothering me, or else I'm going to keep this 1-star review here.
Spoiler alert. That has no impact on anything.
Well, my favorite part of this, though, is that there are devs who are kind of aggressively aggressively independent of this stuff. So Gary Newman, the guy who made Rust, this is the news item for the past week, by the way, which Rust does this thing. It's a 3D survival crafting sort of shooting game on Steam. And your character, you don't get to actually make your character in the game. your character is determined by using your Steam ID. The game actually reads your Steam ID and permanently binds a randomized character model based on the seed of your Steam ID.
Not your Steam
to your
username,
account.
like your actual ID
Yeah,
number
your ID.
that you can't change.
Yeah, it's unchangeable.
Yeah, it's immutable. And so the first part of this was that, so it started off that everybody was just white dudes. That was because they had like a model, and that's what they did. Then they added race into the equation.
Of course,
So
they
suddenly-
defaulted to a white dude as the default model.
But it was also hilarious because when it was defaulted to a white male, like there were no complaints about anything about the game. They're just like, oh, this is just a regular dude.
And then they added the race component. So this was hilarious. So suddenly half the population is now black.
randomly.
Randomly.
Did they have other
And
races?
there's
or
only
just-
black. There's
just
not
two.
No, I think it's just white and black. And then next they added they actually have genitalia in the game, and the size of your genitalia is also determined by your Steam ID. And so people, and you start out naked. It's like you can see everybody's parts. You know, like so people are getting mad because they're a white dude with a tiny dick or something in this game. And it's just like the funny. And then last week they added gender in. So the funny thing
Oh, that
about
was just
this is
last
that
week? I knew they were planning on it.
It's
People
just
were
last
already
week.
up in arms just from hearing about it. But
You should read if you want like a good laugh. Just go to the Steam forums for Rust because people are so upset that it is phenomenal. Some people.
You should be careful. Not for a good laugh exactly, because you'll also
for
be
a laugh at
enraged.
how
yeah.
stupid people can be. But yes, you will become enraged.
So the best part about this is they add the female thing, and the interesting thing is the females don't actually have hair yet, so they're all bald.
They're really doing
which
this
is-
piecemeal, huh?
Yeah, they're really so they're all bald, but it's the same thing. Like the parts that come with the gender are also modified based on your Steam ID. And then,
Although,
like, you
wait,
know,
hold
half-
on a second.
What?
When they add a new subtype of person, do people's existing characters change to that, or
Yes.
is it only for?
Yes.
Okay.
Hence, I think a lot of the rage, where it's not just that. I think in this case, it's not just that maybe you finally got used to like being a black man in this game. Now you're a black woman, and like that comes with now you got your other.
And that took your bigotry one step too far.
Yeah, 'cause you're like I can't handle being a misogynist and a racist at the same time in this game. This is too
There's
much
that
like real life
cognitive
now. I
dissonance,
quit.
right? Like
Yeah,
you're a
So
racist
it's,
misogynist in real life, and now you can't. Either you got to reconcile that by playing this game with your black woman, or yeah, that's
right. So I think it's fun to watch some developers sort of not care, I think a lot. And the reality is, of course, that Rust is still very, very popular, and most people don't care. Like most people think that's an interesting factor of the game is the fact that you actually have this randomized thing happen. So it is always a minority thing, but the reality is like they're so loud.
the
and so
coalition
violently
of screaming
loud about stuff.
babies is always there.
Yeah, that I think it's
Well,
it's-
they're also really aggressive though, because these are the same kinds of people who will, band together. Because even if you take a small group of 20 people who are just slightly internet savvy and enraged enough, they can do real damage.
They know
via the
where to
internet.
go to hit developers.
And so this is, to me, this is actually the biggest problem of all this stuff is that
It's a
all
power
of it's really bad anyway, but they come together and then like foster this intense hatred and want to actually take action on it. And then they find ways to do it that are just really, really horrible in real life.
Well, I sometimes wonder about this though, because for example, there's like a parks like nonprofit in the area, and all they do is people volunteer, and then they're like, go to this garden bed that's at this block and go weed it once a week. Like they tell people what to do. And I just wonder, how much good could be done if we were able to constructively harness the rage of the internet
And make them pull
For-
weeds.
I mean, yeah, make them pull weeds, but in a metaphorical sense, But the idea is like it's people. I don't know. It's weird to me that people band together so thoroughly online to do
harm.
what are actually harmful acts, like with that specific intent. But in the real world, I think I don't know anybody who's like a part of a group that got established to like fuck up real world.
I mean, those
things.
groups are clearly exist. I think it's just
Oh, yeah,
harder
they
to
do for sure.
It's the internet serves as an echo chamber. Wherever you go, you can find a community of like-minded people. And if you are a total dick bag, that's not as easy to do in the real world.
It's very
It's
easy
extremely
to
easy to do on the internet. Yeah. So you can find people who mirror your beliefs.
Well, but not only that, I mean, in the same way that it then looks to us as like the people making a creative product, that there's a lot of hate for what we do because those are the people who scream at us the loudest. When you're a person that's part of that echo chamber, you also feel like, hey, everybody hates this too. What I'm doing totally is reasonable. It makes sense, right?
But it's just not the case in both directions.
It's just not the case.
So what's the lesson here? Do positive people need to be louder about
I think
stuff?
the lesson is haters gonna hate, you know?
That's right.
There is a true responsibility for platforms that allow for comments and users to congregate and socialize in some way to actually moderate this shit. Because the only reason that this stuff exists is because the platforms allow it to exist.
That's true.
It's true.
Well, that's why I love Butterscotch ID, because we have our "Don't be a jerk" policy, and if somebody's a jerk, you're done. No more Butterscotch games now and forever for you, buddy.
All right, well, let's lighten this up a little bit with a question from Alan Falcon, who asks, if you could only eat one food for a week straight, what other food would you most be craving by the end
Let me
of
tell you something, Alan Falcon. I once ate the same food for a year. I felt pretty good about it.
What do you mean the same food, though? Is it the same every meal, like breakfast, lunch, dinner?
When I was in law school, this was when I was super busy with going to class and doing law work, and I was also trying to teach myself game dev stuff. And so I went through all the different things in my life that took time and energy and thought, and I just streamlined the fuck out of them. And one of those things was food, because some people, I'm not one of those people, but some people believe that you need to have a huge variety of food items in order to be healthy or happy or whatever. And I just kind of looked at it as fuel for my brain. So I came up with a recipe that hit all the food groups. It had some carbs, it had some protein, it had a whole bunch of mixed vegetables and stuff. And that's what I ate.
Wouldn't you make like 10 pounds
I would
on Sundays?
I would cook it like 3 times a week. And it would last me, a good 3 days. It was like 8 pounds of food. And I would just remake that, and I could make it super fast and it just in huge quantities. And then I just never had to think about food ever.
Maybe you should share this this speed recipe on the forums or something.
I could. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty friggin' straightforward, but yeah.
To get at the question, was there something you craved during that year of eating the same thing repeatedly? I mean, you must have gone out places periodically.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I didn't only eat, like, as far as my normal meals and stuff. That was it. But yeah, if I was gonna go meet friends or I go to a coffee shop or something, then I would get something there. But
right. So was there a thing that you craved on top of that?
Not really. No. I mean, I occasionally ate chocolate, but that's just always a constant sort of craving,
a constant current underneath everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, this question has 2 parts though, right? Because one is you're only allowed to eat one thing, so you have to choose that thing. And the other one is, now that you've chosen that thing, what is it that now you're going to end up craving at the end of the...
I think mine's pretty easy, which is that, so say I could only eat like meat, just straight up meat for a week.
You'd probably go the opposite direction for your craving, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think what I'd actually want at the end of the day is not a sugary thing, but actually just
a goddamn apple or a carrot.
Yeah, well, like an apple and just a pound of green beans, like string beans that haven't been cooked or anything, that are just like cold.
Yeah, that's true. I'll say I've spent a good amount of time living in India. I've got about 4 months of India living under my belt. And while I'm there, I almost exclusively eat vegetarian food. And it definitely is the case that there was a 2-week stretch where I didn't eat any meat, and I had lost like 10 pounds over that 2 weeks, and everything I ate was really, really spicy and just like hurt my face. And I felt like I wasn't getting the normal sustenance out of it. And there was a point that I just became enraged. I was just like, I'm gonna find an animal and I'm gonna eat it, and that's how it's gonna be.
I'm going to punch it to death on the street and just swallow it.
So yeah,
whole.
I guess it is true that if you can only eat one food, just like a very narrow category, like just vegetables, whatever.
Yeah, I feel like you swing it to whatever that opposing.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Is.
I would say no matter what I eat, I always crave sweet stuff. Even if
Yeah.
I eat sweet stuff, I want
Oh,
more
speaking of which,
Same here.
so
I
I've
had
been
6 cookies
I've been
last
I've been taking time off of eating sweets and drinking booze, and
A sweet, boozy
I
hiatus.
think I'm like
but not-
3 weeks
the
in. Although this weekend our grandpa was in town, so I did eat a dessert. But man, I feel super good. Just all,
You shut your
just
healthy
all
mouth.
around. Yeah, and I walked in. I went into Walgreens. I walked past the candy section. I felt nothing. Just
Man,
nothing.
that's a feat. That's a feat of
know.
human strength right there.
Once you get on the other side of the craving, you're actually just fine. Because I found this to be the case too. That anytime I decide to give up something for a while, it sucks for like a week, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, is then if you ever do it again, now you're right back in the swing of
Unless you
of
wait
having
long
that thing.
enough. So soda is an interesting one of these because for anybody who drinks a lot of soda, A, stop it. B,
You mean Coke or
it's a
pop?
huge waste of money. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Whichever part of the country you're from. But for
Or
anybody
other
who drinks
countries.
soda, there's an interesting thing that happens if you just drink only water for like a month. Because when you go back and try to drink like a Coca-Cola or something, it's actually
It's horrible.
really hard to do. Like it tastes great. Like the first sip, you're like, oh yes, like everything I remember about pop.
You're gonna have a hard time
And then
finishing that. though.
you get like a quarter of the way and you're like, I feel like I'm going to be violently ill. Like this is not going to go well.
Yeah, I can only drink diet soda now. And I
Yeah.
love sweet stuff, but even still, I can only like a can of regular old root beer or something just makes me want to die.
Well, and Sam, you're trying to cut coffee out, which is
I
kind
am.
of
So I had-
blasphemous on coffee with butterscotch. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, it's going to be coffee and tea with butterscotch soon. Oh, speaking of which, just to throw this in real quick because I forgot about it. We're getting the wonderful painter Eric Hibbler, who does all of our box art, is making a coffee with butterscotch
Oh yeah.
art piece. So it should be done. I don't know when, probably 2 weeks or so. Really excited to unveil that thing. But back to the point. So that is blasphemous, given that it's coffee with butterscotch. But
Deal with it.
We usually do it in the afternoon anyway, so the coffee's already gone. But the thing that happened to me is actually that on Saturday, Diane and I woke up and she was like, I want to go look at some cats because I want to get a cat. And I was like, okay. So we went and we found a few cat adoption places where we go basically just play with kitties for the morning. That was the plan. And so I chug a cup of coffee and then go. And I usually have 2 cups of coffee by noon or so. I woke up late and then I had this 1 cup of coffee. And by about, I think like 1, without that second cup, I had been reduced to a feeble, mindless drone.
Quivering blob of a man.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about it, and I was like, this is so dumb that if I don't drink a particular liquid in the morning, then I don't exist as a human being. So,
Just to play devil's advocate here.
sure, devil.
If you were to stop eating, you would also turn into a quivering massive human. So what makes coffee be the thing that you should not?
I think it's
rely
just that
on?
it's optional, probably.
Yeah, it's the option. I don't think those are quite the same thing, but
But it's the same thing. Like it should be equally frustrating that you have to eat food.
it is. I mean, Seth solved that with his previous point.
It is, but yeah, I think
I've always been on
it's
that
just
same thing.
the issue of if you don't eat food, you will just die. But if you don't drink coffee, you're just gonna kind of feel bad for a while, and then you'll be completely fine again.
As you guys are very well aware, you guys meaning the 2 brothers also in this podcast, I've been a ridiculous caffeine addict since I was like 8.
Wait, did we talk about the time where you drank all that espresso and almost died?
I don't think we've talked about that.
We have not talked about that.
We
on
should
here.
go there. Let's go there. Let's.
to start the story though.
You want to talk about my poetry past? We'll talk about your espresso past.
I had migraines as a little kid, and they were idiopathic, which is a fancy doctor talk for we don't know what the fuck's going on. And we did the MRI thing. They tested all kinds of shit, and basically they were like, "You got a brain, looks fine, I guess. There's nothing obvious."
Based on this MRI, we can determine that brain.
So I had idiopathic migraines, and to me, this is one of the most hilarious things about medicine. Like once you know the word idiopathic, you'll hear it all the time. Like you'll go to a physician and they'll be like, "Yeah, he's got idiopathic gastric reflux," and you're like, "Ooh, that sounds like bad or fancy." It's like, nope, it just says you've got indigestion, and nobody knows why.
We know what's happening. We have no clue why or how to stop it.
So anyway, so I had these migraines. They suggested trying a bunch of different stuff to treat them, and it just turned out that caffeine did a really good job. So I was actually taking caffeine pills when I was a wee child, and then our parents were like, "That's dumb. Let's just give you coffee because it's also got caffeine in it." Because I had to like go to the nurse's office every day before lunch to take half of a caffeine pill, right? Like just stupid. So I started having morning coffee instead. So I've been having coffee just forever. And for a long time, because for me, it was a dependency like food, right? Because if I don't have caffeine within a few hours of waking up,
You cease to function.
I get a migraine, and that's just the end of my day. And at various points of time, I've tried to like wean myself back off, and that'll work for a while, but then the migraines come back. And so it's just something that I have to do. For the longest time, I was just so pissed off and aggravated about this because there was this dependency where just like Sam, I was like, why should I have to get up and like have to get this liquid in my body ASAP or else like I'm just fucked?
Though to be fair, I feel like yours is slightly more.
I mean,
like
mine's a
food
medical
situation.
dependency, sure.
Yeah, it's more like a food situation, you know.
But the point here, though, is that I felt the same way about it for a long time. And then at some point, I was just like, hold on. I like coffee. When I drink it, I feel nice and I don't get headaches. Even just ignoring the whole chemical dependency thing. And I have access to it wherever I go because
America.
I'm fortunate enough to have that access. It's not a difficult dependency to deal with. So then at some point, I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not even going to worry about this ever again. I'm just going to wake up, instantly have my coffee, and just live my life.
But the
Yeah.
story, the important story that you're glossing over completely.
In high school, actually, no,
Wait, I want to tell this because I remember.
Yeah, let's tell. Let someone else
I
tell
was-
it because this will be hilarious.
I was there. Well, I wasn't there for the initial part where Adam. So we were going to play paintball, and
I already had a migraine.
Adam was already struggling, and so
He said, "You know what would be good if I had my friends shoot me at high speed with a ball."
yeah. Well, Adam wasn't going to let something like a crippling migraine get in the way of being shot in the face. So
Yeah, I wasn't like vomiting yet or anything.
No. So Adam and his friends were like, we're just going to make a quick run into town. We didn't live in town, but we're going to make a quick run into town and get some coffee and snacks. So they went over to, was it Grinnell Coffee Company?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Adam just said to the barista, who had no medical training, give me
That's true.
the highest amount of caffeine you can fit into the largest container you have.
And his response was, so you just want 20 ounces of espresso. And at this time, I was like a shitty coffee drinker. Like I just drank whatever crappy thing was around me. I didn't really understand what different kinds of coffee were.
And you also didn't understand that caffeine is, in fact,
There's a limit.
a drug you can overdose on. So Adam gets his 20-ounce espresso shot, 20 espresso shots in
Yeah,
one
it is
container.
literally 20 espresso shots, just to be clear.
Yeah, and
That's how much caffeine there was.
And he just fucking downs it.
Yeah, I have a question. Did you just like swill this? Was this just like? Did you just drink it like on the spot?
I drank it on the way home.
He drank it on the
But
way home.
the way home is 6 minutes from Grinnell
Yeah,
Coffee.
he downed that thing, and
Yeah.
so he gets there and. We're like, okay, let's get this paintball match started because the rest of us were just kind of waiting around for these guys to get back. We're all ready to go. So they put their mask. We all wore masks, safety first, guys, when it comes to paintball.
Yeah.
So we put our masks on and we go out and we start playing the match. And then after just like 5 minutes, we just see Adam, like he kind of runs out of the woods or something and just kind of like lays down on the ground. And we're like, what? So we stop the paintball match and we go over there and Adam is just pale, just ghostly pale and just beads of sweat rolling off of his entire head. And we're like, this is bad. And none of us who were already home knew about the fact that he downed 20 shots of espresso before coming to play paintball. So we kind of like hobbled him up and got him into the house, and we called our mother. We're like, hey, something's wrong with Adam. Like he's super sick. And she's like, well, did he eat anything? Did he eat blah blah blah? And then one of Adam's friends was like, well, I mean, we went and got some coffee. And she's like, well, what did he have? And they're like, oh, he had 20 shots of espresso. And so then she was just like, he needs to drink water now, like just a shit ton of water.
Gotta pee that stuff out.
Yeah, you just because the problem is
Could you
can
throw
actually-
it up? Or was it too far? Because like it absorbs into your body real fast. Like, could you get it out, or was it sort of like?
It'll come out. Like if you put enough water in your system, then the water is constantly coming out.
Yeah, but the trouble is, caffeine dehydrates you, and your kidneys have to process it, and without adequate hydration and with all that basically poison in your body, your kidneys can actually suffer some pretty serious damage trying to get rid of all this crap. So she was just like, you need to fix this. And, caffeine takes actually many hours to get through.
It's a 6-hour half-life.
Yeah. And that's a half-life. So it's not all gone. Just half of it's gone.
There were only 10 shots of espresso left after 6 hours.
Yeah. So Adam was just like, so he couldn't move because he was feeling so sick. And he had an even worse headache from the fact that he drank 20 shots of espresso. And
that was also before I learned that I actually can't use caffeine to treat my headaches, only to prevent them.
Yes. So once you already have one, it's a game over.
So I had a migraine when I did this in principle to treat my migraine.
So you had a migraine throughout this whole experience.
Yeah, so the migraine just got worse instead of actually getting fixed.
You're so hyped up that you can't, like, for a moment, lose consciousness.
Yeah, you can't sleep it off. You can't.
That dose puts you on the way on the other side of like a normal. Like, I wasn't jittery or anything. I was just like in a totally different kind of state of being.
Could you see sounds?
I was levitating objects with my mind. Like, there was all kinds of shit.
Did you hallucinate?
No, I didn't hallucinate.
No, he just had telekinesis for a while.
I just developed.
Okay,
I mean, this is like a superhero origin story. You know?
It's a shitty X-Man kind of ability. Like, you got to drink 20 shots of espresso and then you get mild telekinesis for like 15 minutes. It's pretty terrible.
Less than ideal.
So how does the story end, though? What's the rest?
It just ended with Adam laying in bed for like 25 hours.
Yeah, it took a full day to recover.
Us bringing jugs of water to him in rotation before he could finally get it all out of his system and sleep.
It's amazing.
So
it was a little rough.
That paintball outing was not in the top 5.
Adam, didn't you also get shot in the throat when we were paintballing one time?
Yeah, there was I think it was actually Keaton, Seth's friend, like popped up out of a bush, like just 15 feet away from me. So very close range, and just managed to shoot me because like your face mask, goes like protects your neck a little bit, but managed to get like just to the perfect angle and spot so that it just slapped me right in the Adam's apple.
But you were yelling something at the time, so it was like you were just like, "Hey, I got it," and then just like totally cut off.
It closed my throat for a moment. It's like I couldn't breathe for a few seconds, and it like popped back open or whatever the hell, however that works.
I like the idea of Adam standing up and going, "Hey guys, I'm gonna."
It was that was also less than ideal.
Yeah,
do you guys remember we used to go out at night when it was dark, and we'd wear paintball masks and tape flashlights to them, so like we had like a headlight sort of with slingshots and paintballs.
This was before we were allowed to play paintball.
Yeah, we would just get a bag of paintballs.
We could still buy the paintballs with our grocery store money or whatever that we worked
and then
for.
we would just, but then so you basically slingshotting them at lights because that's how you know the other person was there. But the funny thing about paintballs is the way they work is that at a certain speed of traveling through the air is when they're designed to blow up, right? Because they're these hard little balls. But if they go fast enough, then they break. And for anybody who knows anything about physics, when it breaks, all that energy is dissipated into the breaking process, right? So instead of being put into the human,
it's kind of like how cars have crumple zones.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You use that so that the energy gets dissipated in the crumpling or the paintball explosion process. But it turns out that slingshots don't throw balls fast enough to break.
But they do throw them fast enough to hurt like a
bitch.
So instead, all that energy is just dissipated into your human body, and none of it goes into the paintball. That we just would leave with like welts after welt.
Yeah, so nobody wins and everybody loses.
Yeah, I was gonna say nobody could ever get out because no one technically ball.
I think that was the kind of thing though where we did that.
But it hurt enough though that you couldn't help but yell something,
Just
and then
tap
everybody
out.
knew you were hit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and I think our parents saw the extremes that we were going to. They were just like, "Fine, we'll just let them play paintball." Jesus, like this is getting ridiculous.
All right. Well,
Anyway, that was quite a
wrap
wild-
up the questions.
It was
Yeah,
a wild
that's-
tangent.
A wild tangent. A wild tangent appeared, and we caught it. We caught it, guys. I think that'll wrap up our questions for today. Seth, you want to take us out?
Yeah, so this has been Coffee with Butterscotch. It's normally a game dev comedy podcast, but today it was about drugs and paintball, sort of at the end there. Yeah, if you want to check out our games, head on over to games.bscotch.net. We also have a community over at forums.bscotch.net, so come on over there and say hello. And if you would like to get your question on the podcast, head over to podcast.bscotch.net. And just as a quick reminder, we've got a whole smorgasbord of Bitleys. So this week we've got the quality of life patch. If you want to check that out, it's at bit.ly/QOL patch. the Crashlands documentary. You can find the Kickstarter for that in pre-order at bit.ly/Crashlands movie. And we have t-shirts available for the next few weeks, which are at bit.ly/Bscotch shirts. And last but not least, if you want to apply for the game
This is really
mechanic,
getting out of control.
if you want to apply for the game mechanic job, head on over to jobs.bscotch.net.
Nice work. Did you
All right,
take
everybody.
notes on that, or did you just do it off the top of your head?
I just did it, man. Yeah. Also, I was looking at the. Anyways, so that's it for this week. Thank you all for listening.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.